All right, let's dive right in. There's this huge, fierce debate raging right now about a really costly overseas war. And when you peel back the layers, it's a story about power, it's about money, and it's about what a country truly values. And it all kind of exploded after one single, secret meeting.
So, picture this. A senator walks out of a top secret, highly classified briefing about the war in Iran. What do you expect? A serious face, maybe some very careful words. But no, what we got was this just pure, raw anger. And Senator Blumenthal, he was not the only one. Lawmaker after lawmaker came out of that meeting absolutely furious.
So that's the big question, right? What on earth was said behind those closed doors that got these officials so incredibly fired up? Well, we're going to unpack all of it. And you're about to see this whole thing is about way, way more than just one war.
Okay, so here's what they were hearing inside that room. First off, there was no clear endgame. Like, what's the plan for the day after the fighting stops? Crickets. Then, there was no real strategy for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which is a huge deal for global trade. They also heard about the very real possibility of putting American boots on the ground in Iran. And maybe the most shocking part, the idea that Russia and maybe even China were actively helping the other side. And all of this was going down with the American people being kept pretty much in the dark. This anger, it wasn't just about bad planning or military strategy. It goes way deeper. It hits on this fundamental question at the very core of American government. Who actually gets to decide to go to war? If you go back to the Constitution, the people who wrote it were super clear on this. They'd seen what happened in Europe, right? Kings just deciding on a whim to start some war, bankrupting their countries. And they were like, no way, not here. So they gave the power to declare war only to Congress. Why? Because Congress represents the people. The whole point was to force a big public debate, to really hash out if the cost in both blood and money was actually worth it before things kicked off. And that's exactly what Senator Rosen is getting at here. The argument is that the president is basically waging his own war of choice, completely sidestepping that constitutional step. And that's where the frustration really boils over. This massive, life-altering decision is being made without asking the very people who have to live with the consequences. So you've got the constitutional issue, but there's another huge piece of the puzzle fueling all this anger, the absolutely staggering price tag.
Get ready for this number. $1 billion. That's billion with a B. Every single day. I mean, when you hear a number that massive, it forces you to ask two really important questions. First, where is all that cash coming from? And second, what are we not doing with it? Well, here's a look at those trade-offs in the real world. While that billion a day is going to the war, what's happening back home? Enrollment in the Affordable Care Act is dropping. During a government shutdown, food stamp funding got suspended, leaving millions of people without benefits. See, this isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a choice, a direct choice about our priorities. This brings up that classic debate, guns versus butter, military spending versus domestic needs. It's a conversation that's been happening forever. But to really, really get the scale of what we're talking about, we have to take a look at how the Pentagon itself spends its money. Okay, get this. In just 1 month, September of 2025, the Pentagon spent over $93 billion. But here's the crazy part. More than half of that, over $50 billion, was spent in the last 5 days of the month. It's this whole use it or lose it thing they do. They just go on a massive spending spree at the end of the fiscal year to make sure they get the same or more money the next year. So what does a use it or lose it shopping spree look like? Well, you've got a grand piano that costs almost $100,000, over $5 million on Apple products, and the food bill, oh my gosh, almost $7 million on lobster tail, $15 million on ribeye steaks, and, I'm not kidding, over $139,000 on donuts. You can't tell me this is about national security. This is just about burning through cash so you don't lose it. This quote from a Texas state rep, James Tallarico, just hits so hard. He's talking about a community right there in Texas, not far from Dallas, that doesn't even have clean running water. And his point is just devastatingly simple, isn't it? We always hear there's no money for healthcare, no money for infrastructure, but somehow there's always money for bombs. And apparently for lobster, too. Now, this whole debate feels really urgent and modern, but it's not at all. This exact tension, this push and pull between military spending and taking care of people at home,
It's a conversation America has been having for decades. And one of the most powerful voices in that debate is someone you might not expect.
All right, let's hop in a time machine. The year is 1953. World War II is still a fresh, painful memory. The Cold War is really starting to heat up. But then something happens. The Soviet dictator, Joseph Stalin, dies. And the brand new American president, a Republican, and a famous five-star general named Dwight D. Eisenhower, he sees an opening, a chance for peace.
And in this incredible speech, Eisenhower, this is the guy who was the supreme Allied commander, the man who defeated the Nazis. He said this. He flat out called massive military spending a theft. A theft from people who are hungry and aren't being fed, from people who are cold and don't have clothes, a theft from our own future. Coming from a military hero of his stature, those words, wow, they just had unbelievable power.
And you have to understand, for Eisenhower, this wasn't some abstract political idea. It was deeply personal. His whole worldview was shaped by what he saw with his own eyes at the Nazi concentration camps. He came to believe that when people are poor and desperate, when they have no hope, they become easy prey for extremists and dictators. So for him, real, lasting security wasn't just about having more tanks and planes. It was about making sure people everywhere had food, jobs, and a reason to be hopeful. And in his time, the stakes were higher than they had ever been in human history. The atomic age had begun. Eisenhower knew that the next big war, if it was started by some new extremist who got his hands on a nuke, that could be it. Game over for humanity. So promoting global prosperity wasn't just some nice, charitable idea. For him, it was a core strategy for the literal survival of our species.
And that brings us right back to where we started today. It leaves us with a question that is just as relevant now as it was then. From the founders trying to stop kings from starting wars, to Eisenhower's powerful warning, to that secret briefing that made so many lawmakers so angry, it's the same debate. So here's the question for you to think about. How should a nation, our nation, balance the incredible cost of defense with the essential needs of its own people?